I curse you and your stupid startup. I hope they reject you. I want you to finally fail and come back to normal life. Ava's words hit me like a physical blow, her face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. And this was supposed to be my birthday dinner. I stood there frozen, champagne flute in hand, as my wife of 6 years stormed out of our dining room, leaving behind the smell of her expensive perfume and the echo of what felt like the death sentence to everything I'd been building. The birthday cake with its unlit candles sat pathetically on the table, mocking what should have been a celebration. Through the open window, I could hear her car engine roar to life in our driveway. She was actually leaving. Happy birthday to me. My name is Mark Delaney, and until about 30 seconds ago, I thought I was living the American dream. EO and founder of Neurotech, a startup that promised to revolutionize how artificial intelligence integrates with everyday business operations. We were 7 days away from the biggest pitch of my life, a final presentation to a room of venture capitalists who could either launch us into the stratosphere or send us crashing into bankruptcy. And my wife, my supposed partner in this journey, had just wished for my failure. I downed the remaining champagne in one gulp and reached for the bottle. No point in letting good Dom Perignon go to waste, especially when it might be the last expensive bottle we could afford for a while. The irony wasn't lost on me. Eva had splurged on this bottle before our fight erupted, back when this evening was still meant to be special. We met at Stanford 8 years ago. I was finishing my PhD in computer science, already obsessed with my early ideas for Neurotech. Eva was in her second year of law school, brilliant and ambitious, with plans to join one of Silicon Valley's top corporate law firms. She had this way of walking into a room that made everything else fade into the background, tall, with piercing green eyes and a confidence that was magnetic. At a mutual friend's housewarming party, she overheard me explaining my research to a bored-looking guy who clearly wished he was anywhere else. "That actually sounds fascinating," she said, sliding into the conversation with a glass of wine in hand. "But how would you protect the intellectual property? The regulatory environment for AI is a minefield right now." I remember being stunned that someone actually understood the implications of what I was working on. Most people's eyes glazed over when I talked about neural networks and machine learning algorithms. But not Eva. She asked sharp questions that challenged me, that made me think about my ideas in new ways. We ended up talking until 3 a.m., long after the party had died down. The host found us sitting cross-legged on his kitchen floor, surrounded by empty beer bottles, still debating the ethical implications of predictive algorithms in healthcare. I was drawing diagrams on napkins, while Eva poked holes in my logic with the precision of a surgeon. "You should come work for me when I start my company," I blurted out somewhere around 2:30 a.m. She laughed, a sound that made something flutter in my chest. "I don't work for people, Mark Delaney. I partner with them, and you'd need to buy me dinner first anyway." Our first date was 2 days later at a small Italian place in Palo Alto. Eva showed up in a simple black dress that made my mouth to go dry. We talked for hours, barely touching our food. By dessert, I was already imagining a future with her. "What's your end game with this AI company you want to start?" she asked over tiramisu. "Change the world, boss," I said without hesitation. "Create technology that transforms how businesses operate, make artificial intelligence accessible to companies that can't afford to build their own systems from scratch." "And the real end game?" she pressed, her eyes narrowing slightly. "The exit strategy?" I leaned forward. "IPO within 7 years, 9 figures, minimum." Most women would have rolled their eyes or changed the subject. Eva smiled like a predator who'd just spotted prey. "I like a man with a plan," she said, reaching for my hand across the table. "Ambitious, but not impossible." We were married 18 months later. Eva was my rock during the early days of Neurotech. She reviewed all our contracts, connected me with her network of corporate clients, and believed in my vision when it was nothing more than ambitious talk and whiteboard diagrams. We were a team, her legal expertise and my technical knowledge. The perfect Silicon Valley power couple. I remember the night I got our first major investment, a $2 million seed round from a local angel investor. I came home to our tiny apartment, all we could afford while bootstrapping the company, with a bottle of champagne, and found Eva surrounded by papers at our dining table. "We got it," I announced, holding up the bottle. $2 million to build the prototype. She jumped up, and threw her arms around me. I never doubted you for a second, she whispered in my ear. That night, as we lay in bed, she traced patterns on my chest and said, "This is just the beginning, you know. 2 million is great, but it's the next round that will really make or break us." Us? I teased, kissing her forehead. Of course, us, she replied with conviction. Your dreams are my dreams now, Mark. We're building this empire together. That was the Eva I fell in love with. The woman who believed in me without reservation, who saw my vision as clearly as I did. The woman who understood that startups required sacrifice and risk, but who never questioned it whether the potential reward was worth it. But that was before the sleepless nights, before the second mortgage on our Palo Alto home, before I had to ask her to postpone having children just until we secure this next round of funding. Before the arguments about financial security started to outweigh the passionate discussions about changing the world through technology. The first serious crack appeared about 2 years ago, right after our Series A round. The funding had come in lower than we'd hoped, 8 million out of the 12 million we were targeting. We were sitting in our backyard celebrating with takeout sushi and sake when Eva said something that should have been a warning sign. Maybe we should consider taking on a strategic investor, she suggested, refilling her sock cup. Someone who could acquire us if things don't scale as quickly as we hope. An acquisition isn't part of the plan, I replied, surprised. We've always talked about going all the way to IPO. Plans change, she said, her tone casual but her eyes serious. 8 million will barely get us through 18 months at our current burn rate. What happens if we don't hit our targets for the Series B? We will, I assured her. The prototype is exceeding all our benchmarks. Once we get it into the hands of our beta clients, the growth metrics will speak for themselves. She took a long sip of sake. And if they don't? They will, I repeated, more firmly this time. I've bet everything on this, Eva. We both have. That's what worries me, she murmured, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Eva had been growing increasingly distant over the past few months. Her prestigious law firm position provided our only stable income, and I could tell the pressure was wearing on her. She'd started making comments about her colleagues with their predictable bonuses and retirement plans, about her law school friend who joined a stable tech giant instead of gambling on pipe dreams. But I never thought she'd wish for my failure. Not on my birthday, not when we had everything riding on next week's presentation. The fight had started innocuously enough. We were getting ready for my birthday dinner, a rare night out given our financial situation. Eva had come home with the expensive champagne and a small gift box that now sat unopened on our coffee table. The Jensen account is looking promising, I said while adjusting my tie in the bedroom mirror. Daniel thinks they might come in as the lead investor for this round. Eva was putting on earrings at her vanity. That's what Daniel said about the Westlake Group last quarter, and they pulled out at the last minute. This is different, I insisted. Jensen has a portfolio full of AI companies. They understand what we're building. She hummed noncommittally. What does that mean? I asked, turning to face her. It means I've heard this before, Mark. This investor gets it. This client is the perfect fit. This round will put us over the top. It's always just around the corner, but we never seem to turn that corner. I felt my jaw tighten. That's how startups work. You know that. We're building something revolutionary here, not some incremental improvement on existing technology. And in the meantime, we're living on my salary and home equity loans, she said, applying lipstick with a steady hand that belied the tension in her voice. Do you know Margaret and Paul just bought a vacation home in Tahoe? Paul's bonus last year was more than we've paid ourselves from Neurotech in 4 years combined. Are you seriously comparing us to Margaret and Paul right now, the most boring couple in Silicon Valley? He works 60 hours a week building spreadsheets for Google, for God's sake. He also has a 401k that doesn't keep his wife up at night, she shot back, capping her lipstick with a decisive click. I didn't realize you'd become so materialistic, I said, a low blow that I regretted immediately. Eva stood up, her eyes flashing dangerously. Materialistic? Is that what you think this is about? Vacation homes and retirement accounts? You're the one bringing up Paul's bonus and Margaret's second home. I'm talking about stability, Mark. about not having to check our bank balance before buying groceries, about being able to think about starting a family without wondering if we'll be able to afford diapers. And that's when it escalated. Suddenly, we weren't talking about Jensen or Paul and Margaret anymore. We were excavating 4 years of buried frustrations, digging up every compromise and sacrifice that had been made in service to Neurotech. You promised after the seed round that we'd start trying for a baby, she accused, tears threatening to ruin her careful makeup. Then it was after Series A. Now it's Series B. When does it end? When we succeed, I shouted back, when all this sacrifice actually pays off. Do you think I enjoy putting our lives on hold? Do you think I like asking you to wait? I'm doing this for us. No, you're doing it for you, she said, her voice suddenly quiet and deadly serious. For your ego, for your obsession. It stopped being about us a long time ago. That's when I made my fatal mistake. If you really believed in me, in us, you wouldn't be talking like this a week before the most important presentation of my career. I watched her face transform, something breaking behind her eyes. You want to know what I really believe, Mark? I believe you're going to keep chasing this dream until there's nothing left of our marriage, until we're broke and bitter and too resentful to remember why we fell in love in the first place. Eva started, but she cut me off. I curse you and your stupid startup. I hope they reject you. I want you to finally fail and come back to normal life. And then she was gone, the slam of her car door punctuating her exit. Now sitting alone with my champagne and uncut birthday cake, I felt hollow. The worst part wasn't just her words, it was the fear that she might be right. What if I was chasing an impossible dream? What if next week's presentation ended in rejection and we were left with nothing but debt and broken promises? I poured myself a generous scotch and sat in our darkened living room, scrolling through the presentation I'd been preparing for weeks. The projected financials, the glossy mock-ups, the ambitious growth projections, it all suddenly looked hollow to me. Was Eva right? Was I chasing a fantasy while risking everything we'd built together? My phone buzzed with a text from her. Staying at Sarah's tonight, I need space. Sarah was her college roommate who'd always thought I was dragging Eva down. Great, no doubt they'd spend the evening listing all the ways I'd failed as a husband and provider. I found myself opening the gift Eva had brought home earlier. Inside the small box was an antique pocket watch with an inscription on the back. To Mark. Time is our most valuable asset. Spend it wisely. Oh, my love, Eva. The irony was almost too much to bear. She'd been planning this beautiful, thoughtful gift while I'd been obsessing over presentation slides and investor questions. When had I stopped noticing these things? When had the startup consumed everything else? I worked through the night, fueled by anger and scotch, tearing apart the presentation I'd been so proud of just hours earlier. By morning, my eyes were bloodshot, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. Eva's curse had forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding. My pitch was all sunshine and rainbows, with no acknowledgement of the very real risks we faced. As the sun rose over Silicon Valley, I had the outline of something completely different, something honest, something that might actually work. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my small team. We had 6 days to completely reimagine our approach to the investor pitch. My chief technology officer, Daniel, arrived first at our modest office space, a converted warehouse in an up-and-coming part of San Francisco that we'd gotten at a discount because the neighborhood was still transitioning. He took one look at me and winced. Rough night? You could say that, I replied, pouring him a cup of coffee from our ancient machine. Eva and I had a fight, a big one. Daniel had been with me since the beginning, dropping out of his PhD program to join Neurotech as my first employee. He knew Eva well. They'd spent countless evenings debating legal and ethical implications of our technology over takeout dinners in our living room. About the company? He asked, though his expression said he already knew the answer. About everything, I sighed. She thinks I'm obsessed, that I care more about Neurotech than our marriage. And she might not be wrong. Before Daniel could respond, the rest of the team arrived. Aiden, our lead developer, and Priya, our UI/UX genius. They'd both been with me almost from the start, taking minimal salaries in exchange for equity. We're changing everything, I announced to my bewildered colleagues once we were all settled in the conference room, really just a corner of the warehouse with a second-hand table and mismatched chairs. What do you mean, everything? Priya asked, her brow furrowed. The pitch is in 6 days. We've been refining it for weeks. But we've been refining the wrong pitch, I explained, pulling up my hastily created new outline on the projector. We've been telling investors what we think they want to hear. Growth projections that assume everything goes perfectly, technology adoption rates based on best-case scenarios, market penetration that ignores potential competitors. That's what everyone does, Aiden pointed out. That's the game. And it's a game we're going to stop playing, I said firmly. We're going to give them something they never see. Radical honesty. Mark, have you lost your mind? This from Priya, always the most direct of our team. You want to go into a VC meeting and tell them all the ways we might fail? Not just the ways we might fail, I clarified, but how we plan to survive even if we do. I'm adding a whole new section called anti-fragility, how we survive if everything goes wrong. They thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was, but the more I explained my vision, the more they started to see the potential genius in it. By the end of our 10-hour marathon session, even the skeptics were cautiously on board. This is either going to be the most spectacular success or the most spectacular failure in startup pitch history, Daniel said as we wrapped up. Either way, it'll be spectacular. That's when Priya asked the question that had been hanging over the room all day. Is this about the company, Mark, or about Eva? I considered deflecting, but these people had sacrificed too much for Neurotech to deserve anything less than honesty. Both, I admitted. Eva thinks I'm obsessed with success at any cost. Maybe she's right. But what if the path to success isn't what we thought? What if it's about acknowledging our vulnerabilities instead of hiding them? Eva didn't come home that night, or the next. Her texts were brief and cold. Need more time. Working late. Don't wait up. I threw myself into the presentation revamp with an intensity that surprised even me. It was either channel my hurt into something productive or drown in self-pity. The night before our third day of preparation, I found myself at a bar downtown, nursing a whiskey and scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of Eva and me in happier times, hiking in Marin County, attending friends' weddings, celebrating company milestones. In every photo, she looked at me with such pride, such belief. When had that changed? When had belief turned to resentment? Mark Delaney, I thought that was you. I looked up to see Jason Chen, CEO of RivalTech, one of our main competitors in the AI space. His company had taken a different approach than ours, focusing on narrow applications for specific industries rather than our more comprehensive platform. They'd secured $40 million in funding last year while we were still scraping by. Jason, I acknowledged with a nod, immediately on guard. Silicon Valley was a small world and word traveled fast. The last thing I needed was rumors about Neurotech's CEO drinking alone looking miserable days before a major funding pitch. Mind if I join you? He asked, already sliding into the seat opposite me. Drinking alone is bad for the ecosystem. Makes VCs nervous. I managed a dry laugh. Wouldn't want that. He signaled the bartender for 2 more of whatever I was having. Heard you're pitching to Meridian next week. Of course he'd heard. Nothing stayed secret for long in our world. Word gets around, I said noncommittally. Tough room, he commented. Blackwell is a ballbuster. Tore my first pitch to shreds 3 years ago. But you eventually got your funding, I pointed out. On the 3rd try, he admitted, surprising me with his candor. After I stopped trying to bullshit them about our growth potential and started focusing on our core value proposition. I studied him curiously. Jason Chen was supposed to be the enemy, a rival CEO competing for the same investor dollars and market share. But in this dimly lit bar, he seemed more like a fellow soldier in the startup trenches. Can I give you some unsolicited advice? He asked after our drinks arrived. Do I have a choice? I replied wryly. He smiled. They're going to ask you about us, about RivalTech, about how you differentiate your platform from ours since we're already established in the market. I'm aware, I said, taking a sip of my whiskey. Our competitor analysis was thorough, and we had clear points of differentiation. Don't bullshit them, he said simply. Don't pretend we're not good at what we do because they know we are. They've seen our numbers. Instead, tell them exactly how you're different and why that matters. I raised an eyebrow. Why are you helping me? He shrugged. Because the market is big enough for both of us if we're solving different problems. And because you look like I felt 3 years ago when my marriage was falling apart because of my company. I nearly choked on my drink. How did you, the 1,000-yard stare, the wedding ring you keep fidgeting with, the fact that you're here instead of at home on a Wednesday night, he listed. Been there, done that, almost lost everything that mattered. What happened? I found myself asking. We went to counseling. I hired a COO to handle operations so I could actually leave the office before midnight occasionally. We had a kid. He pulled out his phone and showed me a picture of a smiling toddler. Best thing I ever did, and it had nothing to do with my company's valuation. He stood to leave, dropping some cash on the bar. Good luck next week, Mark, with the pitch and with whatever's going on at home. Sometimes they're more connected than we want to admit. His words stayed with me as I walked home through the cool San Francisco night. 3 days before the big pitch, Eva finally came home while I was working in our home office. She stood in the doorway looking both defiant and uncertain. We need to talk, she said, her voice lacking its usual confident edge. I'm listening. I didn't look up from my laptop. I shouldn't have said those things on your birthday. It was cruel and I apologize. Her words were carefully measured, like she'd rehearsed them. Which part are you sorry for? I asked, finally meeting her gaze. Cursing me and my company or wishing for my failure? She sighed and leaned against the doorframe. Mark, you have to understand. This startup has consumed our lives for 4 years. We've postponed having children. We've remortgaged our home. We barely see each other anymore. I'm tired of living on the edge of financial disaster. So your solution was to hope that I crash and burn. That's supportive. I was angry and scared. Her composure cracked slightly. Last month when I checked our joint account to pay the property tax, there was barely enough to cover it. Do you know what that feels like? To not know if we can afford the basics, despite both having advanced degrees and supposedly successful careers? I couldn't argue with that. Our financial situation was precarious, and I had been less than transparent about just how tight things had gotten. The irony is, I said after a long pause, your outburst actually helped me. The presentation was garbage. I've completely reworked it. Curiosity flickered across her face. What do you mean? I mean, I'm going to walk into that room and do something no startup founder ever does. I'm going to be brutally honest about all the ways we could fail. She looked at me like I'd suggested jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. That's unconventional. It's either brilliant or a career suicide. I guess we'll find out in 3 days. She moved into the room and sat on the edge of my desk, closer than she'd been in days. Show me. I hesitated. Really? Mark, regardless of everything else, I'm still a damn good lawyer who knows how investors think. Show me what you're planning. I turned my laptop toward her and walked her through the new presentation. As she scrolled through the slides, her expression shifted from skepticism to surprise to something that looked almost like respect. This risk mitigation strategy is actually impressive, she admitted, pointing to a slide detailing how we'd pivot if regulatory changes impacted our primary business model. Most founders wouldn't even acknowledge these possibilities, let alone have concrete plans for addressing them. We maintained an uneasy truce as the pitch day approached. Eva kept her distance, working late and leaving early, but there was a subtle shift in our interactions. She asked about the presentation updates. I asked about our cases. We were talking again, even if we were carefully avoiding the deeper issues still simmering beneath the surface. The night before the presentation, I practiced in our living room until 2 a.m., speaking to an audience of empty chairs. I adjusted, refined, anticipated every possible question or objection. When I finally crawled into bed, I was surprised to find Eva still awake, staring at the ceiling. I don't want you to fail, she whispered into the darkness. I never really did. Could have fooled me, I replied, too exhausted for another argument. I just want our life back. Remember when we used to talk about things other than runway and burn rates? When we'd spend Sundays hiking in Marin instead of you being glued to your laptop? I did remember. Those memories felt like they belonged to different people now. If tomorrow goes well, things will change, I promise. Not entirely sure if I was lying. That's what you said after the seed round, she reminded me. And after the Series A. She wasn't wrong. I mean it this time, I said, reaching for her hand in the darkness. Whether we get the funding or not, something has to change between us. She squeezed my hand briefly before letting go. Let's talk after tomorrow. Get some sleep. You need to be sharp. The morning of the pitch, I dressed carefully in my one good suit. Eva had already left for work, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Good luck today, I mean it. Those 5 words shouldn't have meant so much, but they did. The offices of Meridian Ventures occupied the top floor of a gleaming tower in downtown San Francisco. My team and I arrived early, setting up in the intimidating conference room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. 5 partners would be judging our presentation, including James Blackwell, a notoriously tough venture capitalist known for reducing founders to stammering messes with his rapid-fire questions. As we were setting up, Blackwell himself walked in, earlier than expected. He was a tall man with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone who'd been making or breaking companies since before I was born. Mr. Delaney, he said, extending his hand, I've been looking forward to this presentation. Your technology has been creating quite a buzz in certain circles. I shook his hand firmly. Good buzz or bad buzz? A hint of a smile crossed his face. Let's say interested buzz. Your approach to neural network adaptation is unique. The question is whether it's uniquely valuable or just uniquely complicated. Before I could respond, the other partners began filing in. As the last one took his seat, Blackwell nodded to me. The floor is yours, Mr. Delaney. This was it, the moment that would determine not just Neurotech's future, but my marriage as well. Mr. Delaney, Blackwell said after brief introductions, we've reviewed your materials. Why don't you tell us why we should invest $20 million in Neurotech? I took a deep breath and abandoned my prepared opening. I want to start by telling you why you might not want to invest in us, I said. The room went silent. One partner actually put down his phone and looked at me with raised eyebrows. Our competitors have more established market positions. Our technology, while innovative, has application limitations we're still working to overcome. And frankly, if certain regulatory changes being discussed in Washington go through, we'll need to substantially revise our go-to-market strategy. Blackwell leaned forward, his expression unreadable. This is an unusual approach, Mr. Delaney. I believe in being transparent about the challenges we face, I continued. But here's the thing. We've built Neurotech to be anti-fragile. We don't just survive setbacks. We get stronger because of them. I launched into the new section of our presentation, outlining specific scenarios that could derail our growth and exactly how we'd respond to each one. I shared real data from our pilot programs, both the successes and the failures, and how each setback had improved our core technology. Most startups come in here and paint a picture where everything goes perfectly according to plan, I said. But we all know that never happens. The question isn't whether we'll face obstacles. It's how we'll handle them when they inevitably arise. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through our technology, business model, and growth strategy, but always with that lens of radical honesty. When Blackwell fired his notorious questions at me, I didn't dodge or spin. I acknowledged limitations and explained our approaches to overcoming them. Your main competitor, Rivaltech, already has significant market share in the financial services sector, one of the partners pointed out. How do you plan to differentiate? By not competing directly with them, I answered. Rivaltech offers excellent solutions for narrow, industry-specific applications. Our platform is designed for cross-functional integration across departments. Different problem, different solution. You sound almost complimentary of your competitor, Blackwell observed with a raised eyebrow. They're good at what they do, I acknowledged. We're focusing on being great at what we do, which is different. As I wrapped up, the energy in the room was different than any pitch meeting I'd ever experienced. These weren't investors looking at me with skepticism or forced enthusiasm. They were engaged, leaning forward, nodding thoughtfully. One last question, Mr. Delaney, Blackwell said as my presentation concluded. What made you take this unusual approach today? I hesitated for a moment, thinking of Eva's curse. Someone very important to me forced me to look at my company through the eyes of a skeptic, I answered. It was painful but necessary. We're stronger for it. The partners asked us to step outside while they conferred. My team and I waited in a sleek reception area, too nervous to speak. After 20 minutes, that felt like 20 hours, we were called back in. Mr. Delaney, Blackwell began, his face serious. In my 15 years of venture capital, I've seen thousands of pitches. Most follow the same template: inflated projections, minimized risks, and founders who act like their success is inevitable. My heart sank. Here came the rejection. Your approach today was refreshing. We appreciate founders who understand that acknowledging weaknesses is not the same as having weaknesses. He slid a document across the table. We'd like to offer you $25 million at a valuation of $120 million. That's $5 million more than you asked for because we believe your anti-fragility strategy deserves the additional runway. I stared at him in disbelief. $25 million? With some conditions, he added. We want quarterly reviews of your risk mitigation strategies, and we'd like to bring in an experienced COO to help you scale operations. That's completely reasonable, I managed to say, still processing what was happening. One more thing, Blackwell said, leaning back in his chair. This isn't in the term sheet, but it's advice I wish someone had given me 30 years ago. Don't let your company cost you your family. I've seen too many successful founders end up alone with nothing but their stock options for company. I looked at him sharply. How could he know? Just an observation, he said with a slight smile. Founders with your level of drive tend to sacrifice personal relationships on the altar of company growth. The smart ones figure out that's a false choice before it's too late. Outside the building, my team erupted in celebration. High fives, hugs, and talk of finally drawing real salaries. I should have been ecstatic, but all I could think about was Eva. Her curse had become a blessing. But what did that mean for us? Drinks on me, Aiden announced, already looking up nearby bars on his phone. You guys go ahead, I said. I need to talk to Eva. Daniel caught my eye and nodded approvingly. Go fix your marriage, boss. We'll hold down the fort. I called her office, but her assistant said she was in court all afternoon. I sent a text. We need to talk. Good news. Dinner tonight? Her reply came an hour later. Can't tonight. Deposition prep tomorrow. The disconnect felt symbolic, the biggest moment of my professional life, and my wife was too busy to even hear about it. I spent that night celebrating with my team, but my mind was elsewhere. By the time I got home, it was past midnight and Eva was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay awake beside her, wondering how we'd drifted so far apart. The next morning, I woke to find Eva already dressed for work, applying makeup in our bathroom. Hey, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Can we talk before you leave? I have an early meeting, she replied, not looking away from the mirror. But yes, we should talk tonight. I'll be home by 7. We got the funding, I said, not wanting to wait. 25 million, 5 more than we asked for. Her hand froze midway to her face. She turned slowly. You're serious? Completely. The deal closed yesterday afternoon. She searched for words. That's incredible, Mark. Congratulations. But there was something in her voice, hesitation, disappointment. I couldn't tell. This changes everything, Eva. We're financially secure now. The company is valued at $120 million. Our equity is worth... On paper, she interrupted. It's worth that on paper. I felt my jaw tighten. This is exactly what we've been working toward for 4 years. Why aren't you happy? I'm happy for you, she said carefully. I need to process this, and I really do have to get to this meeting. She brushed past me, grabbing her briefcase from the bedroom. I followed her downstairs. Eva, wait. We need to talk about what this means for us, for our future. She paused at the front door. Tonight, okay? I promise. After she left, I sat at our kitchen island, trying to make sense of her reaction. This was supposed to be our victory, not just mine. Why did it feel like I'd just driven a wedge further between us instead of bridging the gap? In a moment of impulse, I found myself driving to Eva's law firm downtown. I hadn't been there in months, maybe longer. The receptionist recognized me and waved me through to Eva's office on the 32nd floor. Her assistant, a young man with a carefully neutral expression, intercepted me in the hallway. "Mr. Delaney, I don't believe Mrs. Delaney is expecting you." "I'm sure she's not," I agreed, "but I need to see her. It's important." "She's in a client meeting right now," he explained apologetically. "She should be done in about 30 minutes if you'd like to wait." I nodded and took a seat in the small waiting area outside her office. From there, I could see the framed photos on her desk through the glass wall, our wedding day, a hiking trip in Yosemite, the two of us at her law school graduation. Memories of happier times, preserved like insects in amber. When her office door opened and a client in an expensive suit exited, Eva spotted me immediately. Her expression flickered between surprise, annoyance, and something softer I couldn't quite identify. "Mark," she said as her client departed, "what are you doing here?" "I couldn't wait until tonight," I said simply. She sighed and gestured me into her office, closing the door behind us. "This isn't a good time. I have another meeting in 15 minutes. "Then I'll be brief," I promised. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the curse, about wanting our life back. And you were right." She blinked, clearly not expecting this opening. "I was? The funding is great news for the company, but it doesn't matter if we lose us in the process." She leaned against her desk, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "And what does that mean in practical terms? Because we've had versions of this conversation before, Mark. It means I'm hiring that COO Meridian wants us to bring on board. It means I'm delegating more, working normal hours. It means we revisit the baby conversation. Not someday, but now." Her expression remained guarded. "And when the next crisis hits? When the company needs you again?" "Then we figure it out together," I said, "but not at the expense of our marriage. Not anymore." She studied my face, looking for signs of insincerity. "What changed, besides the $25 million? "You did," I admitted. "When you cursed me, when you walked out, it forced me to look at everything differently. Not just the pitch, but us. I realized I've been applying the wrong metrics to our marriage. I've been treating it like a business transaction. Sacrifices now for returns later." "And how should you be treating it?" she asked, her voice softening slightly. "Like the most valuable thing I have. More valuable than any company valuation." Her eyes filled with tears, and I felt something crack open inside me. In my drive to prove her wrong, to show her that my startup wasn't a failure, I'd missed the deeper message she'd been trying to send. Our relationship was failing. "I don't want to lose you either," I said quietly. "I just don't know how to balance everything." "Neither do I," she admitted, "but I do know that I don't want to be married to Neurotech. I want to be married to you." Her assistant knocked softly on the door. "Mrs. Delaney, your 3 o'clock is here." She wiped quickly at her eyes. "I'll be right there." Turning back to me, she said, "Tonight, 7 o'clock. We'll talk properly then." "I'll cook," I offered. A small smile crossed her face. "Now I know you're serious." At 6:30 that evening, I heard Eva's car in the driveway. Earlier than promised, a good sign maybe? I'd ordered from her favorite restaurant and set the dining room table with our wedding china, a peace offering of sorts. She walked in looking tired but composed. When she saw the table, a small smile crossed her face. "What's all this?" "I thought we should celebrate properly," I said, "and talk." We sat across from each other, an awkward formality between us as I served the food. For a few minutes, we ate in silence. "So," she finally said, setting down her fork, $25 million. "With a 120 valuation," I added. "Our equity stake is worth about 60 million, assuming all goes according to plan." She nodded slowly. "And what is the plan, Mark? What happens now?" It wasn't the question I expected. "We scale, hire more developers, expand our client base, push toward profitability within 18 months. The investors want to bring in a COO, which is actually great because it means I can focus more on product and less on operations." "I meant for us," she clarified. "What's the plan for us?" The real conversation had begun. "We can finally breathe, Eva, pay off the second mortgage, maybe look for a bigger house. You could cut back at the firm if you wanted, or..." Is that what you think this has been about? She interrupted, her voice tight. Money? A bigger house? You're the one who's been worried about our finances, I pointed out. Who cursed my company on my birthday because you were tired of living on the edge financially. She flinched at the reminder. I apologized for that. You did, but clearly there's something else going on here. Why aren't you happy about this? Eva pushed her plate away and looked directly at me. Because I don't believe anything will actually change, Mark. Yes, we'll have money, but will we have a marriage? For 4 years, it's been just until this milestone or after this funding round. Now we have the funding, and you're already talking about scaling and new hires and 18-month profitability targets. That's business, I said defensively. That's what building a successful company looks like. And what does building a successful marriage look like? She countered. When does that get the same attention and strategic planning as neurotech? The question hit me hard. I'd been so focused on proving her wrong about the company that I hadn't considered she might be right about us. I started, then paused to collect my thoughts. I thought we were building this together, that the success of neurotech was our shared goal. It was in the beginning, she admitted, her voice softening. I believed in your vision, Mark. I still do. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being our dream and became your obsession. I became an afterthought in your life, someone who was useful for legal advice or a second mortgage signature. That's not fair, I protested. But even as I said it, I wondered if she was right. When was the last time we talked about having children, she asked. We agreed to start trying after Series A funding. That was 18 months ago. I had no good answer for that. The truth is, she continued, I said those horrible things on your birthday because I was scared. Not just about money, but about losing you. About waking up 10 years from now, next to a stranger whose only passion is his company. I'm still the same person you married, I insisted. Are you? She challenged. The Mark I fell in love with wanted to change the world. Yes, but he also wanted a family. He made time for 3-hour hikes on weekends and impromptu road trips up the coast. When was the last time we did any of that? Again, I had no answer. I miss us, she said simply. I miss the team we used to be. Her words triggered a memory from our first year of marriage. We'd been working late at our dining table, Eva reviewing contracts while I coded. Without looking up, she'd reached across the table and taken my hand. What's that for? I'd asked. Just making sure we're still connected, she'd replied with a smile. Even when we're in our own worlds. When had we stopped making sure we were still connected? I miss us too, I admitted, and I want to find our way back. How? She asked, the simple question hanging between us like a challenge. What if we treated our marriage with the same commitment I've given to neurotech? I suggested. What if we made it our priority project? A skeptical smile crossed her face. Are you proposing we create metrics and KPIs for our relationship? Not exactly, I laughed, but maybe we need some ground rules. Protected time that's just for us, no matter what's happening with the company. Regular check-ins about how we're doing, not just the business, but us. And the baby conversation, she asked, her expression growing serious again. I want that too, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. I've been putting it off because I was afraid of the responsibility, afraid of dividing my attention even further. But maybe that's exactly what I need, something that matters more than stock options and valuation metrics. Later that night, I met with the executive recruiter Meridian had recommended for our COO search. I was clear about what we needed. Someone who could build systems that didn't require my constant oversight. Someone who understood that success meant more than just growth metrics. I'm looking for someone who wants to build a company that enhances lives rather than consuming them, I explained, starting with mine. The recruiter looked surprised but intrigued. That's not usually at the top of founders' priority lists. It is now, I said firmly. That evening, Eva and I went hiking in the Marin Headlands, something we hadn't done in over a year. As we reached the summit overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge and the city beyond, she took my hand. You know what I've missed most? She asked, slightly breathless from the climb. What's that? Seeing that look on your face, she said, studying me. The one you get when you're truly present, not thinking about the company or the next meeting or some code problem. Just here, in this moment. I squeezed her hand. I've missed it too. That was 6 months ago. Neurotech is growing steadily under the guidance of our new COO, an industry veteran who's taught me more about delegation than 4 years of running the company on my own ever did. Eva has scaled back her hours at the firm, taking on fewer clients but remaining engaged in her career. We've started trying for a baby, though we're not putting pressure on ourselves about timelines. Last night was my birthday again. We celebrated quietly at home, just the two of us. When I blew out the candles, Eva asked what I'd wished for. Nothing, I told her truthfully. I already have everything I need. She raised an eyebrow skeptically. The Mark Delaney I married was never satisfied with enough. He always wanted more. Maybe he finally figured out that more isn't always better, I replied, pulling her onto my lap. She kissed me then, and I knew that while Eva's curse might have saved my company, it was her love that had saved me. I have news, she whispered against my lips. Good news or bad news, I asked. She took my hand and placed it on her stomach. Depends on how you feel about changing diapers while running a $100 million company. My heart stopped, then raced. Are you sure? She nodded, her eyes shining. 8 weeks. I confirmed it yesterday. I searched for words adequate to the moment and found none. Eva, that's incredible. Scared? She asked, watching my face carefully. Terrified, I admitted, but in the best possible way. As I held her close, I realized that Eva's curse had been exactly what we needed, the thing that forced us to face our weaknesses and build something stronger from the broken pieces. Next year, I said, holding her close, let's try for a birthday without any curses. She laughed. I don't know. This one turned out pretty well in the end.